that are flying, on maps mystifying. You'll think that I'm lying. This old tale of mine, a journey through time. A permanent fire, cold frost on the pyre. Fruit never expires. You've seen in your eyes, you've seen in your mind. While the old bow their heads, while the blind meet the blind, the marble loses shine. The eye clouds by design. But we know in our soul the one hope, the one truth, that if we believe we can make miracles. Even with the dabbles of time against you, never let the fire fade in you. See the golden goddess with wings of rainbows set sail through the night sky to embrace you. Resist, allow your heart to take you. Never let this merciless world erase you. Passing down the light of the torch to guide you, and you shall be bathed in light.
Wow, that was a cool music number. But I have a feeling some of you skipped right to this timestamp because that kind of music that's translated directly from Japanese to English isn't everyone's cup of tea. So, sorry about that if you guys missed out. Anyway, good morning, my friends. This is Paul. This is actually the first review I've done as the Catholic Gaming Nerd and the first review I've done of 2021. So, I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be reviewing AI the Somnium files for the Nintendo Switch today. And this is the kind of game that, just like the song we listened to at the start, is not for everyone. This is an M-rated game, so of course, if you're too young or have too much of a soft stomach, you're going to want to not play this game at all. You probably won't even want to look at a walkthrough because this is very intense. It has a lot of violence, a lot of blood, a lot of stuff that even disturbed me after all the stuff I've seen in Zero Escape. There's some profanity. There's a lot of mentions of being a pervert and pornography. Thankfully, they don't really show the pornography, but it's implied that it exists in the universe. And overall, a lot of stuff that if you're a Catholic, you'll doubly not want to pick up this game. However, looking at the game as a whole, this is a really ingenious story that just happens to have a lot of questionable stuff in between the amazing moments. So first of all, the basic gameplay consists of two main sections. The first is when you're in the real world and you control a detective cop named Kaname Date, who's investigating a murder of a young woman who was killed on a horse. And that's really all I want to say about the main plot, because this is a visual novel, so there's going to be a lot of reading and a lot of plot development. That's the main point of the game. When you're in Date's perspective, you examine the scenes of the crime or the areas from a point-and-click perspective, similar to the investigations in the Ace Attorney games. Now, this is a clear refinement of those games, because in AI, whenever the cursor is green, that means there's still something left you have to investigate, whereas when it becomes gray, that means you've fully exhausted your investigation. Sometimes you have to click on things multiple times to get the entire script, which is slightly annoying, but at the very least the colorization prevents it from being a game breaker. If you're talking to someone, you can press different directions on the directional buttons / control pad, depending on what controller you're doing, to choose what Date wants to say. Most of the time this doesn't really mean anything, as it essentially gives you a more non-linear way of progressing the dialogue, kind of like in Ace Attorney when you choose what to ask in the investigations. Very rarely did this ever affect the gameplay, although there was one decision I made very early on that affected the very end, which I thought was really interesting, but I can see it not affecting the main narrative at all. In fact, when the game realizes that there's not any more useful information that you need, it'll even give you the option to just stop talking and move on to the next area. There's not really a way of directly controlling Date. There are several scenes where he drives a car, but those are all on autopilot. You just select the location from a map, and I never encountered a situation where I needed to move to a specific location as opposed to doing it in the order I wanted. So the narrative is pretty free flowing in that respect, even though it's actually a super linear story that pretends to be non-linear. Now there is a flow chart, just like in the Zero Escape games, but as opposed to most games in the visual novel genre, you actually don't make decisions in the story. That's actually where the second part of the gameplay comes, in the dream world, otherwise known as Somniums. So every now and then, Date has the ability to view a person's dreams, kind of as a way of getting them to talk if a suspect is unwilling or unable to provide him all the information he needs. These dream scenarios are by far the highlights of the game, as it shows an insane amount of creativity in representing the person's personality and their memories in an abstract, kind of surrealistic way, similar to how a regular dream would work. At first, it takes a bit of getting used to for two reasons. For one, when you're in the dream world, most of the time, with the main exception of the two Minecraft style dreams that I'm showing you, you control a woman named Aiba, who's Date's partner and also who resides in his fake left eye when she's not in use. The form she happens to take in the Somnium world is, it's more or less a half-naked woman, and that might set off a lot of people, especially some of the things that Date can make her do, because in the dream world, the logic isn't always consistent with real world logic. Just to name one of the very first puzzles that you do in the game, there are thorns around a light switch, and in order to remove the thorns, Aiba has to sniff a flower pot so hard that the flowers go up her nose, she falls over, showing a panty shot, and then that removes the thorns. And it's like, that would never work in real life. Not to mention that each dreamer has their own rule set, so there's a lot of trial and error that goes into this game. Once you get into the second dream and beyond, the game introduces a 6-minute time limit, and depending on what actions Aiba does will extend or will decrease the time that Date is able to spend in the dream world. Now this, for the most part, does a great job of immersing you into the fact that there's a severe penalty, which I don't really want to spoil at this point, if Date stays in the dream for longer than 6 minutes. However, if Aiba does something more time consuming, it takes up more time. However, to offset this, certain actions that she does will actually give her what's called timies, and you can use these timies to decrease the amount of time an action will take, such as slowing down the amount of time to a third of what it would be, or even making any option 1 second. At first, most of these timings are really hard to get used to, and a lot of times I had to deal with the fact that I needed to press the L and R buttons to select a timey and the control pad to select an action, which would lead to me getting the worst possible result. But as I progressed through the game, I eventually got so used to it that I was learning how to maximize my time efficiency. Obviously, there are bad choices that you can make that don't really amount to anything, although to make up for it, the interactions between Date and Aiba are usually pretty hilarious, because Aiba is like an AI and Date's, he's a real character. And that, I would say, is probably the biggest flaw with AI the Somnium files in general, is that the characters take a long time to like. At first, I found Date to be an extremely underwhelming protagonist. It seemed like every other word he was either mentioning something to do with porn or being super insensitive. And overall, I was just like, why am I controlling this guy? I feel so disgusting as I'm with him. And a lot of times, whenever he or Aiba tried to be funny, it just didn't make me laugh. There were, I think, maybe only 2 times in the entire narrative where I legitimately laughed out loud, and it was probably because they were referencing something in their other games, like they made a 999 reference at one point, which I thought was hilarious, or when they referenced another bit of popular culture, like To-Witter replacing Twitter. Then there's the other characters in the game, which a lot of them boiled down to either initially unlikable or they took some getting used to. And as you progress through the game, you definitely get to see more depth and more of like what the characters are hiding. And this definitely helps them feel more endearing to the point where you can actually like a lot of them by the end of the narrative, but it still just takes too long to get to that point. And I think a lot of people would be turned off by the character selection right away. Also, not to mention a universal thing that just seems to be every single character's weakness is that they're very easily bribed. There are so many times where Date should say no to a person's request, but because they're blackmailing him, he's just like, okay, I'll do whatever you say, even though it's like, a stupid idiot, you're a cop. You shouldn't be brainwashed so easily. But it's not just him. Almost all of the characters have this problem. And it's like, okay, I get it. Characters in video games aren't supposed to be perfect. But it shouldn't be that every character has the same flaw. They should make it so that one character has one flaw and another has another. It kind of makes it out as though all of them are just that, characters instead of real people with struggles that you can relate to, which that eventually does come, but the initial drag made it so that I was kind of more or less disgusted every time I had to visit someone. However, that being said, in the dream world, there are sometimes multiple solutions to what you can do in the puzzles, which leads to an image of a branching timeline as you get down to each lock, which means you've completed a correct action. With the exception of this Minecraft world, which for some reason you have to be on the linear part of the timeline to make the choice at the end, usually the game makes it very clear what part of the dream leads to a branching path, and then once you're in that branching path, you're stuck, and that will change the narrative in a certain way. Now, there is a true ending to this game, but you have to travel through multiple timelines to get to that true ending. And while I definitely think it's really cool that you have to have all these branching paths to get to the end, it's not exactly satisfactorily explained why you had to travel through all those timelines. Maybe it's because people figured, oh, well, when people are playing Virtue's Last Reward and Zero Time Dilemma, some people would get the bad game overs just because they were curious what would happen. And so rather than penalize them, we'll make it so that the game forces you to take every timeline. So even if you think, oh no, this is a terrible decision, you kind of have to make it if you want to proceed through the narrative. However, by the time I got to the end of the game and discovered all the plot twists, I was really amazed at the way that the game continuously tricked you into making you think that you had everything figured out, and in typical Chunsoft fashion, you realize you know absolutely nothing at all. In fact, by the end of the game, I was so mind blown that I was like, I'm used to Chunsoft games. I should have known what they were planning all along, and I didn't. And it blew my mind so much that I had to tell my mom about it, even though she's not as good at this mature stuff as I am. I definitely think the climax is well worth discovering. If nothing else, it definitely redeems Date as a protagonist ever so slightly in my eyes, and it leads additional depth to the characters, especially because this game tries so hard to say, oh yeah, we're just going to give away the plot before it's over, and then you realize you were dead wrong the whole time. It's absolutely incredible. I really don't want to spoil it for you, but I also highly doubt a lot of you will want to know the ending because of all of the mature stuff in the game. I mean, when the game boots up, you see the Spike Chunsoft logo, and then a spear pierces the logo from behind, so that should give you a slight indication of what to expect in the gore. Don't expect everything to be so cute as in this Minecraft level. This is by far the tamest part of the whole game, and even though it's later game footage than I usually like to show, that's because anything else I show is probably going to be disturbing. So unless you have a really strong stomach and you don't get easily stimulated, I would recommend that you skip this game and, I don't know, ask me in private, like, hey Paul, I can handle it, but I don't want to see it. Let me know what the plot twist is. So this is really unfortunate because if you have the stomach, this is an amazing story that's up there with the Zero Escape and Ace Attorney games. But if you don't, then the story is just going to gross you out and you won't want to see it anyway. So I feel conflicted in what I should say about the game. I think if you are able to handle all of the M-rated stuff, you're in for an absolute treat. And the user interface during the investigations is very convenient, and it makes it so that you're never in an area longer than you have to be. And the dream worlds are often a lot of fun to figure out, even if it's slightly frustrating when you don't know what choice to make because dream logic isn't always consistent. That being said, there's an amazing musical number, and if I talk not long enough, I will probably end up showing the whole thing because I only showed you a preview at the start. So there are definitely some nice little surprises to be found throughout the adventure, and I think if you like visual novels and you like games that remind you of the movie Inception, you're in for a good time. Just be well warned that this is an M-rated experience and is not for the faint of heart. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If there's anything I left out or you need cleared up, please let me know in the comments section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and I do hope you won't stop the video at this point and you'll join me in an amazing dance number. Bye!
Teacups that are flying, on maps mystifying. You'll think that I'm lying, this old tale of mine. A journey through time. A permanent fire, cold frost on the pyre. Fruit never expires, you've seen in your eyes. You've seen in your mind. While the old bow their heads, while the blind meet the blind, the marble loses shine, the eye clouds by design. But we know in our soul the one hope, the one truth, that if we believe we can make miracles. Even with the devils of time against you, never let the fire fade in you. See the golden goddess with wings of rainbows set sail through the night sky to embrace you. Resist, allow your heart to take you. Never let this merciless world erase you. Passing down the light of the torch to guide you, and you shall be bathed in light. Track through the dimensions, spellcasting connections, and secret conventions. And when you are near, there's no need to fear. But call me a cynic, approaching the limit. My heart and my lyrics, but will they break through? And will they reach you? While the old lose their way and forget about faith, while the rain turns to ice, their hearts lock like a vice. But we know in our soul the one hope, the one truth, the fires of love can warm any heart. Resist, your dreams are worth defending. Fight on, your will is unbending. See through the void in your eye, unwinging the pyramid of your mind, unending. Revolt, even with death impending. Live on, dream through space, rending. Walking with the spirit of hope beside you, and our hope shall never die. The fires of love will never die. Iris on a mission, the sacred herald. Let me be your guide, the rainbow seraph. Let's fly together, shuffle, forge our world. The arrow of time, through music and rhyme. While the old bow their heads, while the blind meet the blind, the marble loses shine, the eye clouds by design. But we know in our soul the one hope, the one truth, that if